Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd with the best teeth in the game. And it's time for another edition of Let's Argue, this time a super sexy, special, intimate, patron-only edition where I hit up that Patreon page, that sweet-ass Patreon page, and I basically take your hot takes, unpopular opinions, and tough questions from there and respond to them in this video. Let's go. Coming from a religious background, I felt that Jesus is King was an acceptable Christian album. Many people from my church disregard hip-hop as the devil's music. However, Jesus is King is convincing those people that hip-hop isn't so devilish and is helping them accept hip-hop as an art form. Look, I would have to know who these people are and how they're accepting hip-hop, and are they listening to other hip-hop artists now because of Jesus is King? Are these people listening to Tyler, the Creator, or are they listening to Clipping, or are they listening to Jay-Z after having heard this record now? I mean, maybe there are some instances of that for sure, but I don't necessarily see it as accepting hip-hop when your gateway drug or the only music that you're listening to from the genre is only hip-hop that I guess comes to you on your own terms. Like, I'm only going to listen to hip-hop if it's vegan hip-hop. Yeah, if it's rappers who I know are vegan or rappers that only rap about not eating animals. To me, that's not accepting hip-hop, that's not accepting an art form. To me, accepting hip-hop means embracing it and understanding it on its own terms. If any of these people that you're listening to ever reaches a point where they're doing that, I guess let me know. It's certainly possible. I guess if Jesus is King is your first hip-hop album, it could open you up to a host of other things, for sure. The last song on an album shouldn't be released as a single. The last song is the climax of the whole album and should be a surprise going into it. I think there are lots of different ways that you could structure a record. Last track doesn't need to be a giant finale, and I don't know, just by chance, with so many artists coming out with so many records and they want to market their albums well, you're going to have scenarios where, yeah, maybe the final track is maybe one of the most fitting songs to expose the audience to first, to get them salivating, get them excited to listen to the LP. While I would love to live in a perfect world where every final song on every record is a perfect, amazing, orgasmic climax that ties the whole thing up perfectly and, oh my god, it just all makes sense now. That's just not the world we live in. We live in a dirty, messy, filthy, disgusting world where there are little to no rules in art. Kieran J. Callanan carries on the spirit and ethos of Freddie Mercury better than any other artist has since his passing. Wow, that is quite the statement. I don't know if I wholeheartedly agree, though I do definitely fuck with them having a similar showmanship vibe. I think there are a lot of things about Kieran J. Callanan that are much different. Much different. In fact, I think they may have more separating them than bringing them together, artistically and philosophically speaking. But again, from that showmanship angle, Kieran has it, and I wish that there were more artists in the rock and even the pop world that cared a bit more about showmanship. Thoughts on the Super Bowl halftime performers and Super Bowl performances in general? I haven't paid attention to what the roster is going to be for this new one. I guess I'm going to just exist in ignorance until it's just a surprise day of, and just kind of take it in then. But generally, while they are a bit of a spectacle, and sometimes you can get a good performance out of them here and there, Super Bowl shows are usually just a shit show. You know, that's really what it is. Especially that last one with the Travis Scott thing and the SpongeBob reference. I'm shocked that many, if not all of the artists involved in these things don't get frickin' paid. The version of Wolves that was originally released on T-Lop is better. The mix may be rough, but the Sia feature on the updated version is awful, and having Frank on the end of the old version made it feel like his feature was more of a hidden gem. I agree with you in some respects on this take, especially on the whole Frank thing, though I do still prefer the newer version, if not only for the fact that instrumentally and structurally it just feels a lot more complete. Doesn't so much feel like a a rough sketch of an idea. I just wish that in its final version, the whole Frank feature managed to stay on. And while the Sia feature is not my favorite on the entire project, it does contribute to what this song so desperately needed in its original version and that structure. The vaporwave scene doesn't give enough credit to artists like Boards of Canada, who basically birthed the whole idea of composing music around the idea of nostalgia via incidental music in an analog format. Macintosh 420, while a landmark album, wasn't the start of this particular universe. Yes, everything you say here is true, but I think that your perception of this need to give credit might have more to do with your perception of vaporwave and the world that it evokes or creates, or really what other people listening to vaporwave more casually might get out of it. I mean, I think a lot of people might just kind of be enjoying Floral Shop for the fact that there are some funky, catchy, heavily sample-based jams on it, you know? While the whole nostalgia thing is certainly a factor, I don't quite get the same vibe from that record that I do a Boards of Canada album. Like, obviously vaporwave is not an island. It did not occur in a vacuum. There are albums and musicians and sounds that influenced vaporwave artists to do the things that they do that were outside of the purview of vaporwave. Still, the genre, the movement, it's a pretty unique thing, despite whatever vaporwave's non-vaporwave influences may in fact be. And while it's always nice to give credit to the artists that paved the way for you and acknowledge those that have inspired you to do what you do, I don't know if you've noticed this, but a vast majority, from what I've observed of vaporwave artists out there, they tend to play it pretty low key. Yeah, they're not really shouting out their biggest influences or anything, but they're not really shouting out anything. Like, a lot of them are a little elusive. And honestly, I like it that way. I would kind of prefer it to stay that way. They may be campy as hell, but you'd be lying to yourself if you said that bands like Dropkick Murphys and Flogging Molly aren't fun to listen to from time to time. Dude, I was hella into fucking Flogging Molly back in college. All those weird fusions of punk and folk music, whether it be Flogging Molly, a little bit of a Go-Go Bordello, I was into back in the day as well. They were fun. They were great. Saw Flogging Molly live once as well. Maybe even twice. But either way, Flogging Molly was great. Drunken Lullabies. Battle of the excessively large bands. Which group wins in a fight to the death between Slipknot and Wu-Tang Clan? I don't know. If we pit the two groups against each other now, I would have to go Slipknot. But if we're talking Wu-Tang in their prime, with ODB there, it's Wu-Tang. Not really a let's argue thing, but I'd love to hear if you own any records that you hate. Well, since you asked, I just so happen to keep this CD copy of Corey Feldman's Angelic to the Core under my pillow at night so that it's good, positive, bad but amazing good music, bad music vibes seep their way into my mind so that maybe one day, if I'm lucky, I can too come up with a record as genius as this one. Dave Navarro has had a better career hosting Ink Master than he ever did as a musician. I mean, that's not really surprising, because it seems like when it comes to tattoos and visual art, Dave Navarro knows what he's talking about and he has good taste. And on top of that, he's just a very good-looking man. Dave Navarro is a good, great-looking man, honestly. Like, he's and anybody who has the aesthetics of a Dave Navarro, they're going to do well on television. Groups should have their review score divided by the number of members in order to be compared to solo artists. 4 minds coming together to make an 8 out of 10 album isn't as impressive as one mind making a 5 out of 10 album on their own. I don't give a shit if it took 30 people to make your record. I want that record to sound good. I'm sorry, but like, if your album sucks, it's not impressive that one person made a suck album. In fact, I find it more impressive that one would bring on so many different collaborators and still have that record come out sounding cohesive, well-written, entertaining. Working by yourself is actually pretty easy because you have no one to get in the way of your ideas other than you. And what's funny is people who think along these terms will write off like the last Beyonce record because it's too many collaborators on that album. Beyonce is not a good writer. Beyonce is not an authentic artist. But then they'll simultaneously write off the groundbreaking forms of pop that Billie Eilish came through with on her new record, and she just made that shit with her brother. But at the end of the day, perceiving the quality of an album or slicing the score down according to how many people are on it, are you on crack? Are we poo-pooing Miles Davis's Bitches Brew now because of how many drummers are on it? I listened to Dissect just to laugh at a white person matter-of-factly reciting hip-hop lyrics. Yeah, I guess that can be pretty funny. Shout out to Dissect, though. Really good podcast. Amazing music podcast. Mwah. Tony Martin was the best black... I can't even say this one because it pisses me off. Tony Martin was the best singer Black Sabbath ever had. Does this exist just to make me mad? Do you hate me this much? Do you really hate me this much? You wanted me to be this unhappy today? Why would you want me to be not happy? Why don't you want me to be happy every day? Why can't we have nice things? Gang Starr is one of the best is proof that making good music with a deceased rapper, R.I.P. Guru, is possible, and not just a corporate ploy to squeeze an artist's name/legacy dry via their stands and mourners with work they may not have intended for release. Yeah, posthumous releases don't need to be a greedy cash grab that essentially cheapens the image of the artist in question. The Gang Starr record proves that. While it's not the only good posthumous album out there are plenty of great posthumous records. It's certainly unique in that you do have a key member of the duo still around, kind of crafting the record, and it's come so long after Gang Starr sort of broke up as a duo and Guru passed away. So that record, essentially a long time in the making. It's again rare that you see a posthumous album come out that far into the future. But, we got it, and it's good for the most part, and yeah. Happy with it. My Teenage Dream Ended by Farrah Abraham is an underrated piece of outsider music and predated PC Music, 100 gecs, and Charlie XCX's current output by a few years. I mean, it predated some of these things by a little more than a few years. It's actually pretty incredible what that record was ahead of the curve of. In some respects, it really was the shape of pop to come. And as weird as that record is, and as unlikely the success of that record, very far post-release has been, I don't know. I really just have so much respect for it. It just kind of gets better and more relevant with every passing year. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. That has been the latest episode of Let's Argue. Thank you very much for watching and just being a part of our Patreon community over here. And we obviously thank you by giving you this sweet-ass content. So do what you can to stick with us from month to month. We will continue doing these videos. Glad you're enjoying them. Glad you're getting a lot out of them. And we'll be looking forward to answering more of your hot takes and such in a future Let's Argue Patreon-only video. Cool? Cool. Forever.